idea brings questions, but I think for me as a healthcare professional, having the data from the testing, I think that makes a big difference. And so feel very comfortable, drinking it and sponsoring it.
Mm-hmm.
Short on local water supplies and long on regulatory requirements. Do a deep dive with us by listening to the Full Circle podcast to learn how Las Virgenes Municipal Water District and the Triunfo Water and Sanitation District are meeting 21st century water supply challenges for a portion of the Los Angeles and Ventura County regions.
Welcome everybody to this special edition of the Full Circle podcast. I have this wonderful group of guests with me today. We have ShyRoy from LA County Medical Association, the past president. We have Brian Berry over here, is the executive director of the Ventura County Medical Association. And we have our Los Virgenes Board president, Andy Coradeschi, here with us today. And we're very excited to have a conversation about pure water and how that fits into the medical community. And so we're excited to get this conversation going. Thank you, everybody, for being here with me today. This is just fantastic. So I'd like to just maybe start off a conversation to talk a little bit about yourselves, if you don't mind. And Brian, what kind of got you into the profession and being part of the medical association? How did you kind of get to where you're at right now? And then Shy, please tell us a little bit about that too.
Well, sure. My background is orthopedics and sports medicine. I was the certified athletic trainer and orthopedic physician assistant. I was the director of sports medicine at San Diego State University for many, many years.
An Aztec.
Yeah, and before that, University of Colorado in Boulder. And, always loved sports, always loved science and medicine, and seemed like the perfect fit. So through the years, worked with various organizations, and just about 3 years ago, the role for the executive director position for Ventura County Medical Association came across my desk, and I was kind of looking at it and just go, this is a marvelous opportunity. So it worked real well, and met the board pretty quick, right before the House of Delegates, the last one we had down in L.A. And before you knew it, we were on board. So we have an exceptional board of physicians. You met quite a few of them already.
Yes, and, wonderful.
Very supportive. So, my job is to bring all the best resources to the physicians, whether it's in the hospitals, the groups, private practice, the residents, and, let them be the best physicians they can. So that's how we all got started.
Who were some of the athletes you worked with at San Diego State? Kawhi Leonard, Marshall Falk?
Yeah, Marshall. I just got a nice note from Marshall this morning. Just had a birthday. And so it's kind of interesting because I have to be very diplomatic when somebody asks, all right, Brian, who are you cheering for any Saturday or Sunday? Because I've got students now all over the country running. So I just kind of say whoever leaves the tickets at will call. It seems to work really well.
And one of the things that nobody knows is that Brian and I kind of come from the same area. You have some family in Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I have some family in Cleveland. Yeah. I'm from Detroit, Michigan myself.
Yeah.
And a bunch of cousins down in that state, below Michigan.
Yeah, the greatest state of Ohio.
Yeah.
Go Bucks. Yeah. So that's cool. So I know you and I had a conversation about it. I lived in Cleveland for a little bit myself. So what a small world, what a connection, And again, thanks for all the work you're doing out here for everybody too.
Means,
Yeah. Shy, what about you? How did you get in, tell us a little bit about where you're from and what you've done.
I got a connection to Cleveland too. My parents, I've never been to Cleveland, but my parents, when they first immigrated from India, immigrated to Cleveland.
Really cool.
And my dad was a graduate student at Case Western, and so he was. So he started there, and it was super cold for people coming from tropical India, and so they were. My mom was not a huge fan, and so they ended up moving to warmer pastures eventually. But I've lived here almost 15 years in the LA area.
Yeah.
I came over here, I did my internal medicine residency at Georgetown, and then I moved here for my cardiology fellowship at Harbor UCLA. And it's a place that I love. It's a public hospital that serves, almost exclusively communities of color, almost all of our patients are Medi-Cal patients, and so it's a really rewarding community to serve and a rewarding place to work with a lot of great, residents, fellows, medical students as well. And when I first moved here, got involved with the medical society I never really gotten involved in organized medicine before until I moved here, and got a lot of really good mentorship. And LA County Medical Association, it's serving the biggest county in the country, and was able to, grateful to become president a few years ago when I was president during COVID, when COVID hit. And so that was a real experience to go through, was grateful to be in that position to help lead that initial response from the county, as we didn't know a lot of stuff, and so trying to piece all the information together and all of the all the policies in an imperfect way, but we were a lot of people working together in a pretty chaotic situation, and I continue to practice at Harbor UCLA, and really grateful to do that.
That's great. And so, we a little bit know about Brian's team. So, do you have sports teams that you follow?
So, I was born in Austin. My dad went to UT for graduate for his PhD.
Oh,
so I root for UT, and then I also root for the Cowboys. That that ruined half your audience probably, and then. And so Cowboys and UT are probably my two biggest.
Well, you got your roots
and
there.
UCLA. UCLA.
Of course, UCLA.
Yeah.
Wink,
yeah.
right? Right. Well, that sounds great. Good work. You do some excellent work out here. Of course, yeah. And Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yours? How did you even get here to the water district? Because you have a cool background too.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I have a degree in civil engineering, civil and environmental engineering, and I worked as an engineer for a number of years after I graduated from college. I then took a detour into the entertainment industry. So I'm not a doctor, but I played one on TV. I'm just joking. I remembered. And now it's been great. Things have come full cycle. I've come back here to the water industry, and it's really been it's a blessing for me. People speak the way I speak. They think the way I think. They have the same concerns and celebrate the same successes that I'm involved in. And so it was really great for me to come back to this industry.
Right. And you're an East Coast guy too.
I am in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey, just outside of New York City.
Yeah. And we all found our way out here from Midwest, East Coast kind of thing,
Exactly.
It's kind of interesting. And so, a couple of things. How did you? What motivated you to run for office to become a water board member?
Well, interesting. A friend of my family growing up, he was actually our Boy Scout director, the top guy at the Boy Scouts. Anyway, so he was on the board of directors for the Southeast Morris County Municipal Utility Authority in New Jersey, and so it's water and power. And as a young lad, I loved to fish. I still do. And we were driving. We were at a campsite or on some Boy Scout camping trip or something, and he was asking me about my fishing and where I fished. And I told him a couple of lakes that I went to, and he said, that's our lake. And I said, I don't actually know what that means. It's your lake. And so that's when he told me he was on the board of directors for the water district, and that was one of their reservoirs. That was actually the reservoir that fed my house, and I had no idea at the time. And so he joked and he said, you're really not supposed to be in there, but if you do ever get caught, just don't use my name. And I said, okay, right. I won't. But so that's kind of where the whole interest, I think, probably in water started. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
And so since we have to round this out, what sports teams are you following?
Oh, well, I'm northern New Jersey, so I'm a Giants fan through and through.
Okay.
It's almost worse than being a Cowboys fan right now.
It's been very difficult since 2011. But yes, it's a tough one, but I stand true to my Giants.
Well, coming from Detroit, the license plate frames read Detroit Lions rebuilding for the last 67 years.
Right.
Pacing ourselves.
See, exactly.
Right,
You don't
can't do it too fast.
Too fast.
Right.
The Lions actually did really well last year.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that was deflating when Saquon Barkley was traded. So.
You know what? I love the guy. I'm really happy he's having success where he is.
Yeah.
I really wish he was having that success with the Giants.
Right.
Obviously, that's not the case, but I love the guy. I loved him. He was such a... He was not just a great player, but also just a good human being.
Sure.
And so I wish him all the success.
And we need more of those in the world. Good human beings,
Indeed.
So, like, one of the things I think that, like, for the throngs of people that are going to be listening to this, what does the medical association's kind of function and role in a community? Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about what that is, because maybe there's a lot of people who don't know.
Well, sure. Every association is a 501c6 nonprofit membership association for physicians. And we're all component societies of the California Medical Association, which is kind of our mothership.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always go county by county. There's some counties that blend together to make up one larger society. Our essential job is to provide the best possible resources for the physicians in the medical community. So that could be anything from contracts and negotiations, all the way down to what I feel is one of our most important roles, is providing the policy in the state for patients and physicians, and being that voice and driving it forward in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
So making sure that we've got everybody covered from that standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's a membership organization for physicians, and I think 50 years ago, a membership organization like California Medical Association, the different county societies, were really part of providing infrastructure for private practices and small private practices, like helped with billing and those kinds of resources. Things have changed a lot in terms of like the way healthcare works, in 2025, and it's been a gradual change. And a lot of the practices are part of larger institutions now, and I think that for a lot of physician members, that's less of a need than it used to be. There's just less people who need that through the actual medical associations. And so I think that the second thing you talked about is a reason that a lot of people join. I think regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, our healthcare system is, broken. And, there's many ways to approach fixing it, but, something is going to happen over the next decades, because what we have isn't tenable, and you can see the fights up in DC in terms of cutting programs that are already underfunded and don't provide the requisite needs for our poor and our elderly patient populations. And so I think a lot of physicians join these membership organizations to help bring voice to the concerns of the healthcare system, and bring a cohesive voice on how we can, help best treat patients in our communities. And so I think that's probably, if you surveyed a broad swath of physicians, that's the most important function and for the membership organization, and why they exist, I think, in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of some of those things, like I know you had brought up COVID, right? And this question isn't necessarily this specific to COVID, but what are some of the things that you both kind of like deal with or keep you up at night, as you look now and like in the future? What are some of the problems or some of the concerns that you have when you're representing physicians and just the greater community, like stuff that people may not know about yet, but and what you are planning maybe on advocating for? What kind of stuff keeps you up at night?
Sure. I mean, I think that the Medicare and Medicaid systems in the country, Medicaid has been always underfunded, and here just our Medi-Cal system, which is our California's Medicaid system, we provide care for about 50% of California children, and so it's a huge vital part of the caring for California families, and it's the patient population I serve, and it's inadequate. It doesn't provide community standard care for these families. For our families in South LA, if I, as a cardiologist, order an ultrasound of the heart, it takes months to get that study done, and that, and sometimes that's too long. And so unless I call somebody or something like that, but if you just put it in the queue. And so we're just very under-resourced, in an outpatient setting, and that's mostly because it's underfunded. And it's coming for Medicare as well. Medicare is really underfunded as well, and we've already started to see in California that same access to care problem that Medi-Cal patients have, our seniors are seeing with Medicare, finding new primary care physicians and things like that. And it's already here in California. It's coming to all 50 states. And unfortunately in DC right now we're talking about further cuts to these systems. And so that is the, there's many problems in our world, but, in terms of like this week right now, as the federal budget comes up, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that keeps me up at night. What's going to happen with our healthcare system.
Yeah. What about you, Brian?
Well, one of the things that we're working on with the VCMA is affordable housing for the medical community, and we just had our economic roundtable report, and Ventura County's struggling. We are now listed as the most expensive county in the nation.
Really?
Average home price is $975,000, which means it commands a combined income for a household of over $350K. Who has that?
Right.
So our $13, $18 an hour tax office workers, all the way up to the residents that are carrying $500,000 in debt trying to raise a family. How do we keep them in Ventura County? So it's a real issue that's facing. And I talked to Dr. Google a couple of weeks ago and just checked. There is 1.3 million square feet of unoccupied commercial real estate in Ventura County. So we have to figure out what we're going to be doing different in terms of policy and land use there, because if one hospital goes down in the county, Ventura goes with it. So it's an urgent issue that we're leading the conversation on. To date, no one has said, no, that's the wrong thing. They've all said, you're exactly right. So we're seeing some momentum in terms of the conversation. So, one organization can't do it all. So, our real role is to kind of convene, the different groups that haven't had the conversations, or the conversation's been siloed to date, kind of bring them together and figure this out. We're problem solvers. We'll figure this out. We have to do it now, though. So that's an issue that's really, because my kids are affected by that too. How are they going to, live and work where they grew up?
Right.
So we're not alone, and it's personal and professional. It's a nice wine pair. So
that's great that you guys are taking that on, because people talk a lot about workforce housing, but healthcare workers are not usually part of that thought process, and so it's a real need for not just physicians, but other healthcare workers, and it's just great that you guys are leading the conversation on it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So ultimate goal is to get the whole CMA behind this, because we've got in rural communities it's the same thing. Access to care. What are you doing with the workers? So we have to solve this puzzle quickly.
I hear like a lot of stuff you're talking about is like there's a growing divide socioeconomically, even more so than it has been. And from what you both are saying, like even physicians are impacted by that as much as like different demographics within different areas. And so it's kind of was listening to you was starting to make me think about like if you would bring in like the concepts of climate change impacts into the mix. How do you see like that impacting these different groups and that divide, and it grows? Is there something that you are kind of connecting the dots to like public health, medical issues, exacerbation by climate change impacts? Like how does that impact maybe what you do moving forward to serve your communities?
I mean, I personally, we lost our home in the Palisades fire, and that was a direct, increased risk because of because of climate change. Obviously thank you.
Oh my God.
Obviously we're in a forest fire zone. We live in Malibu, but climate change has really increased the risk of forest fires, not just in California, not just in Southern California, but throughout the country in other areas as well. And so just to speak about Southern California, climate change, with huge rains, followed by drought-like conditions, just really makes for kindling for forest fires. And so, we just had this huge event, and the healthcare outcomes from that event are going to be felt for years to come. It starts with all of the debris and the toxins in that debris that wash out into the water, into the ocean, and into Santa Monica Bay. You're talking about air quality that's affected for at least months on out after an event like that. And then obviously the mental health part of all of that. And cleaning up the water supply. It takes in these areas. As I'm speaking to people who know better than me, but it takes weeks to months. It doesn't. It takes some doing, and then in the midst of all of this, getting the information out to people to how to protect themselves. Not just the people who live there, but the workers who are helping fixing these problems. And so that's a really catastrophic outcome of climate change that we've just experienced here. And obviously there's so many different health outcomes that are more subtle. Whether that's incidents of skin diseases from sun exposure in places like Southern California, all the way to climate change contributed to income inequality, and the way nutrition works and affordability and all of those things. And so it's this sort of the tentacles of climate change are everywhere, I think, and you can go down lots of different routes. Yeah. And but it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah. What about one of the things, especially in Ventura County, is there's a large population of workers that pick all of our fruits and vegetables that is often shipped across the country to feed a nation. And thinking about how that and climate change impacts could play into that specifically. Is the medical association kind of involved in kind of looking out for not just that population, but kind of looking at the economics of the agriculture industry, how that kind of fits into health outcomes for a lot of the migrant workers, and in that, because I've always kind of been kind of interesting, because Ventura County is very different than LA County, because it has a lot of different economies, if you will, and what it does. So I'm just kind of interested in that component to it.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up in the economic roundtables. We've had 3 of them, one at CLU and then a couple others. We had one at the Conejo Chamber of Commerce last week. So they brought up that specific point about the land use for agriculture compared to living. And Ventura County is the only county in the country that has a by-ballot system for land use. It's you got to vote it in. So everybody that's voting is going to say, well, I don't want that I don't want any more, building in my area. So, yet we've got probably one of the top rated agricultural and farm turf in the world, with Sunkist, Del Monte, Limonera. They're all there. So now we've got that worker population that needs access to care. How are they going to get that? Ventura County had one FQHC, and that's Clínicas del Camino. It's doing a great job. So they kind of, along with the county hospital, handle a lot of those workers. So they're part of the community. If that goes down, which is, for years it's been Ventura's main signature is the ag.
Yeah.
We got to take care of that population. So we're on that. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
So that access to care, the speed and the efficacy of that is something that we're paying close attention to. Thank goodness we've got a pretty good track record in Ventura County in terms of the reach and all that, but we can't take our eye off of that.
Yeah.
You know?
One of the common threads through these conversations I have is like access to clean water, right? Whether it's like for the health of a population in a community, but also like to grow our food supply, right? And I was kind of wondering, like, when we start thinking about climate change impacts at like that scale, and kind of focus the discussion on water and how climate change impacts are creating a need to look at like water supply, where it comes from, and reliability a little bit differently. I was wondering, Andy, how do you feel like the climate change impacts are pushing the industry that we're involved in, that we're a part of, to look at different opportunities to create a local supply of water instead of relying on that water that may or may not be there from erratic weather patterns?
Yeah, it is actually pretty exciting in I guess a scientific sense. So unlike most of Ventura County, right here in our district, we rely entirely on water from the Sierras. So it's 400 something miles up north of Sacramento, and it comes into the California aqueduct and comes to the State Water Project and comes down to us. Now I know Ventura has a lot of groundwater in Ventura. The Oxnard Plain has a huge amount of groundwater, and you also have rivers. You have the Ventura River and the Santa Clara River. In this area we don't really have those options, and so we are really dependent upon the water from the northern Sierra on the west side of the Sierra, and that snowfall, which melts and becomes our drinking water, is literally dependent on which way the winds blow in the winter. I mean, it's how can you have a society that depends on which way the wind blows? Mm-hmm. And that's literally what we have been depending on for the past 100 or so years. And so what we've been doing here is trying to diversify our water sources, and it's neither easy nor simple, but it is, I think, exciting because some of the things that we are doing here are things that are going to be done throughout the western United States in the future, and probably around the world, considering global warming. And so one of the things we're working on here, and this is not wholly. One of the things we're working on here at Las Virgenes is called our Pure Water Project. And I think you two are somewhat familiar with it. The original driver of this project was regulations, governmental regulations. We have wastewater. Wastewater throughout history was put in a river or a creek and goes out to the ocean, and then it just magically cleans itself. Obviously, we're in the United States. Everything is regulated. There are regulations for how clean that water is that we put into and it goes into Malibu Creek. And Malibu Creek rolls out to Surfrider Beach in Malibu, so it's a pretty famous area. It's a pretty famous creek. It's a pretty famous surf spot, and so the federal EPA is requiring that water to be cleaner than it has ever been required to be previously, and we've always met or exceeded the cleanliness standards. And so, in order to upgrade the Tapia wastewater facility, which is behind you on that picture, in order to upgrade that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And so we reached out to the different stakeholders in the area, different cities, environmental organizations, and we asked, so how can we all, let's all brainstorm so that we can resolve this problem. And ultimately, what one of the citizens suggested was, if we're going to have to clean this water to a standard which is already cleaner than potable water, can we drink that water? And we said, well, we can. We'd have to spend a little more money, but we could clean it to the state and federal regulatory cleanliness standards. And so that's what we're doing now with it's called the Advanced Water Treatment Facility, AWTF, and it's going to clean wastewater to potable standards, and it'll add, ultimately, the forecast is about 30% of our water will come from the wastewater. So that's 30% more water for the people in this region. And on top of that, we have a couple more projects which are kind of fun. Another one is, and this one's really exciting. 2 years ago, I was brand new on the board. One of the board president, we were at a conference, a water conference, and the board president said, "Hey, Andy, come here. I want you to take this meeting with me because you have an engineering background." I said, "Oh, okay." And we sat down with a couple gentlemen who explained this concept of deep sea water desalination. So it environmentally friendly, uses much less energy, doesn't affect the fish and the phytoplankton and all, just on every aspect better than what I call your father's desalination, right? Because your father's desalination is a huge plant on the beach, on the expensive beach real estate, sucking water in from the ocean, potentially affecting negatively any kind of organisms that live near those pumps and all those things. And this resolves all of those issues, and it brings water and provides water which is pure water, which is not the same pure water as you see on the bottle in the Albertsons or Vons, where pure water is sort of a marketing term. It's literally just hydrogen and oxygen, and so it's an exciting project. We have a public-private partnership with this company, and we are helping them test their designs. 2 years ago, when Jay Lewitt, board president at the time, brought me into the meeting, they literally had little more than an envelope and some drawings on the back of it, and now they have an actual smaller but fully functional deep water desalination pod, and they're going to put it in our drinking water reservoir and do a lot of testing. And so this is coming up later on this month. But it's crazy. In literally 2 years, went from the back of an envelope drawing to something that's actually working and proving the concept.
That's exciting.
Super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't John F. Kennedy that said, whoever figures out how to desalinate rules the world.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And the technology is something that can be deployed anywhere in the world. So anywhere
it's
in
a scalable model.
It's a scalable model, absolutely.
Wow.
It's really, we want to not get too excited about it because maybe
Sure.
it's just a step along the process. Maybe it's the final step. Maybe it's just one of the steps. But it's pretty exciting.
You're moving the chains down the field, aren't you?
Yeah.
We're not reinventing the wheel here, just for the people who are going to be drinking this water. This has been done in other places in the country.
Yeah. So exactly. So this particular style of desalination, which is environmentally friendly and doesn't use a lot of energy, is a brand new concept. All right. Desalination has existed before, and it has a number of hurdles. Obvious hurdles, and this is basically resolving all of those hurdles.
It's the water pressure that's the force, right?
Exactly.
So mechanically, it isn't as complex or risky,
Exactly.
like you described.
It's really deep under the water, as you said. There's a lot of existing water pressure, which provides the pressure for reverse osmosis. So reverse osmosis is pushing salt water through very tiny screens, and all of the salt molecules stay behind, and all the water molecules get pushed through because they're very small. And so, it's using the existing natural pressures under the ocean to do that. And additionally, that it's very deep in the ocean, I think 1,400 feet or so, very little animal life, and so there is very little issues with
Impact's going to be minimal, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so deep.
Yeah. And and one other kind of exciting thing is that water's really cold, and so when it comes back to shore, it then can be used to cool whatever needs to be cooled. So it has energy uses, energy benefits as well as energy uses. It's going to be really interesting and fun to see this come to fruition.
So periodically, our beaches and things are shut down because of bacteria that's growing, etc. Obviously the debris, waste from the fires, etc.
Yeah.
How is that any effect on the way that water is cleaned? Does that have any impact, or it's so shallow up here that it doesn't really impact down there and increase the work of what needs to be done?
That is a great question. All right, I can't say I know for sure what the answer is, but what I do know is that these reverse osmosis screens are so small. The only thing they allow through is H2O molecules. So I would imagine any toxins or
it's going to catch any microbe.
It would stop them all. I mean, water molecules, thankfully, are tiny. They're like the tiniest compound on Earth, and so the screens which allow the water molecules through should not be able to allow any kind of pollution of any kind of toxins through at all, and that's basically the design of the whole process.
So it sounds like you're going to run the test in a couple of weeks at the reservoir,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Love to see that out.
You're invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's on March 21st, 10 o'clock in the morning. We'll make sure you both get invites.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You bring up a really good. I love the discussion about technology, right? And one of the things I kind of wanted to pivot to in our discussion is how technology is not just enriching our lives in different ways, but how it's applied to creating viable water supplies, right? And so what Andy was talking about, using the reverse osmosis membranes or screens, it does in fact remove everything you can think of: PFAS, pharmaceuticals, bacteria, protozoa, viruses, you name it. So literally on one side, it'll have all that, including salt. On the other side, it's literally just a water molecule, right? And so, having said that, our pure water project, right, is going to supply, like Andy said, about 30% of our water supply here, right? And for a lot of people, they're going to be like, am I okay with this? Because it is taking water that we've used before in our homes. It goes through a traditional water treatment, process at our wastewater plant. And then it's going to get treated 3 more times. And then it's going to be put into our reservoir, and it's going to sit there for about 4 to 6 months. And it's going to get treated yet again 1 more time before it goes back to someone's home or business, right? So you use it, it's treated 7 times, and then it's, goes back to your house. So it's a reuse. So it's just taking what Mother Nature has taught to us as a blueprint to recycle and reuse. And we're just expediting that process, right? But some people may have apprehension because they can't get over this idea of like it's unhealthy or that it's gross and that kind of thing, right? So I think the question I have for everybody is, when you think about it, because you both have toured our demonstration facility, you've tasted the water, you're still here with us, functioning adults. I do it all the time. I promise you that I didn't have hair before I drank it, and I still don't. So it's not the water. But I'm asking you, like, we approached you and said, what do you think about this? And it's important for us to have this connection together to the medical community, because one of the things that we want to do is get people to feel comfortable consuming this water. And one of the things is it safe? And kind of like to have your input on like why you think it's safe and why anybody out there would think it's safe, and to say, you know what, because of these reasons, we've endorsed this. Could you answer that for us, please?
It's going to be tested. It's not just it's not just trusting the process. There's going to be, they're tested multiple times along that way until it goes into the pipes. And so it's a new thing, and new things, obviously people ask questions, and I get that. But I wonder how many people I don't know. I could walk you through where the water comes from and gets through their pipe through their water filter that we haven't changed in our refrigerator in like a year or something, that the red light's on. We'll get to it tomorrow. So I think that there is, having this novel idea brings questions. But I think for me as a healthcare professional, having the data from the testing, I think that makes a big difference. And so feel very comfortable, drinking it and sponsoring it.
Mm-hmm. So like when we presented this information to you, we obviously showed you data associated with it. You guys, I know, did some research on your own, and that made you more comfortable with saying, you know what, we're okay with this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can go further. We took it to a number of physician leaders, in LA County Medical Association, and I can tell you, I don't think that there was anybody really after we had the discussion, looked at the data, looked at the process, that really had any apprehension about, this being anything other than, totally fine for public health, in terms of public health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I might have misunderstood one of your questions earlier when you were talking about had this been done before, and I was speaking specifically of this Ocean Wells project,
Yeah.
but desalination as a process has been, I think it was invented in the early 1950s, and it's been used around the world since the 1950s.
Yeah.
So this is certainly not anything that's new to humanity.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Well, one observation before I forget is thank you for reaching out to the physicians. And the community's going to trust to a high degree their physicians.
Yeah.
And if we take those data and referee them and really analyze them and look through that, that's a big part of the confidence going up in terms of the public. All right. So if the physicians and the physicians' families feel this is a good thing, we can communicate that and help amplify that message. Another analogy is think of the innovation steps around this and just the cool engineering. If you're at JPL looking for ways to sustain life on Mars, you're going to have to figure out a similar path here. So don't underestimate the impact on this on other elements of environmental science and health. And you're the tip of the spear here. So this is pretty cool. So to rally around that enthusiasm is going to be based off of the data. The confidence with the medical community is going to be a big element in terms of a lever in gaining the acceptance of the regular population. And all you need is a couple of victories in a row, and before you know it, this is going to be standard. And 30% is a big chunk.
Yeah.
That you're collecting here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I mean, San Diego has been recycling wastewater for like a decade or something now, and they seem to be okay down there.
Yeah, everyone's okay.
Yeah, so like
They lost the Chargers. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, though. But
that explains everything.
so like I was thinking how this pure water. Andy said this pure water project, Las Virgenes Triunfo, is the impetus was a regulatory. Like that's how we kind of came up with the concept. And one of the things that we kind of started to also think, because we're very mindful of sustainability initiatives here at the district as part of our mission, right? Why would we upgrade a treatment plant that would discharge water that is of higher quality than drinking water into the environment? We're trying to rethink that wastewater isn't a waste product, but it can be considered a resource, right? Mm-hmm. And so having said that, we decided to move down this path with, of course, with influences from the outside, getting stakeholders involved and kind of having them help guide us and navigate us to we got to this point. When you get into the nuts and bolts of this, right? Like how it actually works. We send the water through. It goes through ultrafiltration, which removes a lot of the larger particles, and it could be protozoas, viruses, bacteria. When it gets to the second part, it goes through that reverse osmosis membrane or screen, and it pretty much removes absolutely everything from it. But as a safeguard to it, we also put it through an ultraviolet light, just in case if there's any actual DNA from some particle or compound or in pathogen or whatever, it breaks it up. So the end result literally is just a water molecule, right? So when we think about like how that, that complex sort of concept is, and most people, are not necessarily like going to be super excited about talking about like, hey, what kind of pieces of ultrafiltration you work with, what kind of light bulb and that, is, what I mean? Getting into those nitty gritty. But when we talk to the community about this, and through your physician lens, thinking about like that kind of lofty conversation about the science around it, what do you think people want to know, and how we would better communicate this through the lens of a medical association and from a physician's perspective?
They want to know what it is in language we could all understand, how it works, why it's important, and go reverse algebra on that. What are the ramifications for our environment, our culture, if we do not do something like this? So why it's important, okay? Can you prove it, and who says so other than you? Those are the 5 things everybody wants to know, in that order.
I mean, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
And going through sort of the scenarios that people think of in their head, if some factory like you saw in the 70s and 80s dumps some awful chemicals, chemical waste into the supply, will all of this clean all of that? And it sounds like it will. It sounds like it would. And so, those kinds of, sort of scenarios that we think about as, sometimes irrationally, we're kept up at night about these kinds of scenarios. And so, like, I think answering those questions, I just like frequently asked questions can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. You brought up Mars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this technology has been used on the International Space Station for years. So if it's good enough for the astronauts, it's good enough for us, right?
Right.
So, like, so having said that, is there like any type of like specific kind of like narratives that you think that like we could share with the community to get them to feel more comfortable with this? Is it something where like us partnering together to go out and have conversations with the community? Of course, we would have dinner before or after, because make it fun, where we can kind of like share this information with them to get them to kind of buy into this more. Now, here's the other thing. Andy was right. Our advanced water purification facility is going to be constructed in the next couple of years. And because of the construction process, there's going to be a lot more eyeballs on like, hey, what's going on over there? Hey, we're putting, all this pipe in the ground. What's that for? So people are going to be more engaged than they have with now, because at this point in time there's so many things going on in the world that like there's water is not top of mind, right, until it needs to be, or until you're forced to think about it. So what are some things that you think that we could do collaboratively that we could share with the community that gets them to feel more comfortable again about this? And I use the term tongue-in-cheek, and this was created nearly 30 years ago, toilet to tap. That is a very clever marketing tool to kind of dispel, like, of course we don't want that. But we know that, like, it's not that. It's so much treatment that goes into it that it's cleaner than it would be, like, just a general sort of, like, it's cleaner than it's pure water, right? It's pure water. So, like, I guess what I'm trying to get is, like, what kind of things do you think that we could do as a water, as in the water industry to, like, get people to feel more comfortable, because that term is going to be used a lot. And also, like, what could we do combined as a medical community to kind of share this together?
One recommendation, this is a long haul. This is going to be, let's look 5 years from now.
Yeah.
All right, so in 5 years from now, who's going to be the biggest voice? A recommendation is work upstream. Kids have amazing BS detectors, all right?
Yeah.
So you get the youth involved right now, speaking that narrative. They're all about sustainability. They're all about climate change. They're all about health. Get them upstream and then have them champion the conversation, because if they're comfortable with it and they're also influencing, right, that's a force right there. So don't underestimate tapping into the youth. They are our future leaders. They are also our future users of this. So hit them early. We'll handle it from the medical. So now you got both ends coming in. All right. So hit them upstream. That'd be a recommendation.
Yeah.
Get them to rally.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, I think, focus on, not everybody wants to know how the sausage is made, right? And so focusing on what are you actually drinking, and that's pure water. And so, obviously being totally transparent about everything, but I think that the focus should really be about what it is you're actually putting in, what you're drinking. And so, so I think that should be what you're sort of leading with on the messaging. And then in 2025, people, in our country, people trust so many different things, and so I think what we do a poor job of is, as a society, is building coalitions around messaging that should be non-controversial. I think a lot of times we make non-controversial things controversial because of, sort of the way that our political messaging and, entertainment messaging, all of that works, to get clicks. And I would just try to, in my opinion, I think this should be pretty non-controversial. And not that people shouldn't have questions and all of that stuff, but when you look at the data and you look at what people are drinking as the outcome, it should be pretty non-controversial. And so, developing a coalition around that and going to, whatever, sources, whether it's on social media, different types of news outlets, and physicians, teachers, as you were talking about, in schools, and just, having a message that can travel from, one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And so I think that that's what we should be doing on a lot of issues, and obviously this is a big one coming to our community here.
That's interesting. It's starting to make me think about this too, how we deal with misinformation a lot. We all do, right? And so, like, one of the things I was thinking of listening to you is this idea of, like, that's gross or whatever it is, and we know it's not, right? And I'm kind of trying to draw a parallel between what you all went through during the pandemic, right? There's a lot of misinformation. I was going to, like, why would you get a vaccine? You don't need to wear a mask, that kind of thing. You don't need to social distance. How did you combat that misinformation? And, like, I think that there's a parallel to be drawn between what you did and what we can do and what we should do, and learn from that, because that was a big deal. And you're right. I mean, that was very politically driven, I think. And I think that, like, I'm starting to recognize that as we move forward, that water things, especially in this state, are becoming more and more political. They've always been there, but I think that, like, it's becoming even more so. So do you kind of have any insights onto, like, what you did to dispel that misinformation and how we can kind of learn from that as a water industry?
Yeah, I think, and probably looking back on it, was probably even tougher in Ventura County in terms of misinformation and things like that than LA County, though, related. But leading with the recommendation and then being transparent about the evidence, and getting people to buy into that.
How do you do that?
Going to all sorts of people, and it worked for a while. I think, for a while there was a coalition around, people were really scared. People were very scared for their lives, for their family members, for, the impact on society, and there was a lot of unknown, and there were no perfect decisions to be made. There were no, looking back on it, there would be, a number of things that I think that anybody who was honest would say that we could do this differently or that differently. We got that one right. But I think leading with process, being transparent about the process. And I think you can question many things that happened in California, LA, etc., and anywhere else on different spectrums. But we had a process. We were pretty transparent about that process and the data and the reasons we were doing those things. And I think in LA we were able to for a long period of time, get a lot of buy-in, and as we sort of removed those pandemic era constraints, I think we, were driven by process there as well. And I think looking back at COVID, that was just as important as anything else. Something I harped on. We did all these things, but when the data doesn't require it, you really need to be transparent with the public and pull back in a reasonable way. And so I dealt with it as, a physician. I also dealt with it in schools. I'm a community college trustee for Santa Monica College, and so those are, healthcare and education were the two big things that were impacted, in addition to the economy as a whole and businesses, et cetera. But those were two, two areas of, of the biggest controversies around this, and just transparency and being well-intentioned and bringing people along who are well-intentioned, and sometimes you disagree, but just always trying to present your well-intentioned foot forward, I think, as a leader and association.
Yeah. What was your experience?
Well, you mentioned leaders. There's three pillars to leaders: trust, respect, and credibility. I don't trust you because I don't respect you. All right? I don't respect.
It felt like you were looking into my soul.
Yeah. I don't trust you because I don't respect you. I don't respect you because you're not credible. If any of those wobble, the stool falls. Flip that around, and you're genuine, transparent, and really, really listening to the patients. That's kind of what Ventura did. Right? Yep. They were the first to reopen in business. They were the first to get schools back. That wasn't by chance, right? And that was because they had the trust of the community. Was it perfect? Heck no. But it was, it was in the 90th percentile. It was pretty good. So at that time, I was the chief of staff of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce. So I was the COVID safety officer for the chambers. I was dealing with global, federal, state, county, city, Rain Man, Beautiful Mind, BS.
That's a tough position.
And I saw it from the inside. So, again, BS ometers are on high for everybody. So it's making sure that, like you said, it's being honest about it, genuine, don't BS, and that'll establish that trust, respect, and credibility. It's going to be the same formula, for something like this too. And that, so to get that willing cooperation, you have to provide the evidence. But if you don't have the evidence, say so, and just say, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And that patient-physician relationship is so mission critical here. And if you don't trust your physician, who are you going to trust? So that puts us in a really nice position to be able to provide that bond with the patients, because their healthcare is in our hands, on a good note.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's some really good information. Drawing some parallels between that experience and kind of like what we're going to be kind of moving toward. And being a communications person myself, I've been really focused on how people get their information, where they get their information. I think that whole plays into a whole different discussion that we can have at some point in time. Probably not today per se, because that's probably an entirely other podcast we could do. But the last thing, just as a general thing, Andy, just one last thing I would like to ask you specifically is, since you got your ear to the ground in the community, being our board president, being, an elected, there's a lot of people who talk to you and ask you questions about water. Is there anything that you could share with us that, is something that you find to be a concern that some of the residents that you represent, come to you and say, what about this? I'm really worried about that. Is there anything you could share with us?
Yeah, it's what's interesting, and what we were just talking about is trust, right? Trust, and it seems like in the medical industry, there's sort of an innate trust in general. I think with patient to physician, patient to doctor. I worked at the water district in my town in New Jersey when I was in college, right, as a summer job, and this is the first time I've been involved in an agency like this as an adult, and I will tell you there are a number of people who don't trust electric company, they don't trust the gas company, they just don't trust. They think everybody is out to get them for some reason. And before I joined the district here, I spent a lot of time watching their board meetings and seeing how they related to their customers and seeing the issues that they brought up and how they resolved those issues. And it really gave me a lot of confidence that this district has something going for it, which is an amazing staff. The gentleman sitting right across this table from us right here is one of them. And so it's so for me, because I spent a lot of time actually researching the district, I became confident in their abilities and confident and they have my trust. Not everybody has that much time to do their research, and so it's difficult to overcome sort of biases that some people maybe got from their parents growing up, or I don't know where it comes from, but they just we have. And what I like to see is all the efforts that this district has gone to over the past probably 4 or 5 years to get the information out to our ratepayers about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how safe it is. And as I look behind you, Shy, and there's a pure ale on the wall there, which is beer that we made with this purified water, and that's one of. And if you would like a can to take home with you, or go ahead and have one. But I mean, it's really helped a lot of people get over that mental hurdle of drinking something that at one time was wastewater.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's something that we have contended with for a while, but one of the things that we're trying to do is provide comfort and reassurance to the community through doing just stuff like this, where it's having a tasting, or we've also had other stuff where it's like, come in and check out this coffee. We actually had a pure pizza event, so the dough is made with pure water. Just basic things that everybody does on a regular basis that that they like. If you don't like pizza, I don't know, but it's effective that way. I appreciate that. That was a great insight into kind of like some things maybe in the community that people talk about, and that sort of reassurance that you as a board president is giving them for those people you represent. Is there any parting thoughts that you'd like to share before we kind of wrap up our conversation today? Anybody?
I think this is super exciting. I think it's a way forward, I think a lot of the impacts of climate change were so reactive. And so, we're probably in a position where this is reactive as well. But I think that it's, maybe a little bit ahead of the game than we could be if we were less proactive about it. And so I think that's, it's a real exciting way to address a dilemma with proactive policy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, one of the things I wanted to make sure that you all know is how much we value and appreciate, you coming and talking about this with us, but also that both of your highly regarded and important organizations are endorsed our process and our Pure Water project. It is incredibly meaningful to us here and to the community. I just thank you for all of your time and your insights into this. And Andy, thank you for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk about this. And I hope that if there's ever a time that we can help you, please let us know. And I'd love to figure out how we maybe sometime shortly, down the road, we can talk about this again and have another conversation. And maybe we could even come together and do an event here and there and come out, talk to your constituencies and talk about what we do. But just thank you so much for doing this and being a part of this. It's incredibly meaningful and important too. So good job. Thank you.